As I stood up, the room swam and then cleared, and as I walked, I felt as if I was swimming rather than walking, as if each step was harder than the last because the ground was pulling at my feet as I tried to move. I waited for my ears to pop, but realized that it was the room, that it felt as if the room itself was holding its breath. Was it anticipation? I had no way to know, and maybe I really didn't want to find out. I fought that off and forced myself to put one foot in front of the other until I was again at the swinging doors. When I was a few feet from being outside, I thought of that song by Alice Cooper. Step into the street by sundown. Step into your last goodbye. You're a target just by living. $20 will make you die. Then softly humming that song, I swallowed hard and stepped outside into the bright sunlight of a new day, thinking that it just might be my last. I could see that Nemrul, my worst enemy now, had a pair of Colt 45s all chromed up with clean pearl handles. They were exact copies of the ones I had. He turned to me, pacing back and forth as he spoke, and hissed at me. They bet me you wouldn't show, that you were too scared, but I knew better. I wondered why he was stalling. He kept talking as if he was waiting for something, some sign, or maybe for me to move into the right place so he could get the shot he wanted, the way he had practiced. But I wasn't going to answer him. I never really even heard him then. I was not listening to his words, just his voice. I wasn't going to move and do him any favors, because I still thought that if it got to be too much, I could dive back inside and hide in the dark. I told him you weren't smart enough to be scared, that you still think that you might yet live through this day. He showed nothing but contempt for me as he spoke. I knew mercy was not a word he was familiar with. Knowing that I had to rattle him somehow, shaking him up was my only advantage, and fortunately it was one of the few things that I was good at. I was hoping he was the kind that went off and lost focus when he was angry. "Hey Nimrod, are we going to do something here, or you just want to talk me to death?" I asked as I smiled at him. I saw the edges of the fabric near his face smoldering, and I smiled. Then I dived to my right and pulled my guns out, firing as soon as they were free and thankful that they were still real. When I was a kid, I had this recurring dream where someone was chasing me, and no matter how fast I tried to run or tried to escape, I was always too slow and he was always super fast. Or I couldn't hit him hard enough to hurt him, making him laugh as he hit me with his punches that would really hurt me. Watching Nemrul uncross those arms and lower them to his guns was a lot like that. It was like watching a slow-motion action videotape. Click, 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 as if I was watching the Zapruder tape of John Kennedy being assassinated by all those gunmen. It happened so slowly that I could have counted the hairs on the back of his hand. The way he moved spoke hours upon hours and day after day of practicing with those pistols or in his hands until they became second nature, a part of him. I could see he had a different callus on the pad of his other hand, this one from fanning with one hand to fire even faster, and the dirty glove on that hand worn away from years of overuse. All of this combined was what made him the gunfighter he was now, a dealer of death and well fitted for his chosen profession. And maybe it's true that your enemies become a mirror of you, because he also dived to his right as he fired. I fired at Nemrul as he fired back at me, two of our bullets colliding between us as we fired, and another was bent, sent off its deadly path by a fragment of one of those shattered bullets. Intent on our purpose, we fired and emptied our guns and reloaded as we tried our best to kill each other. I rolled over and tried to reload before he fired anymore, and saw he was doing the same. Though he was taking his time, and he watched me as he loaded, I had to look at my hands. Soon we were both ready again, but he drew first this time, and I felt the heat of a tiny fragment of lead as it hit my left cheek, just below my eye, and it stayed there, underneath the surface of my skin. I felt it as it burrowed into my face and made my eye twitch rapidly, and it might have cost me a good second or two as it broke my concentration. I absently slapped away at a bug or mosquito that wasn't there. I took out one gun and then aimed at his gut and let the weight of the gun and the kick of firing it raise my arm. Then I kept shooting that way until I was sure I was firing at his head, and I held it there. As quick as I was, Nemrul was even quicker and usually more accurate. All his shots aimed at my head, but unlike me, he never seemed to hesitate as he fired, and I was lucky that he missed. He fired quickly as he moved to his right again. In a low profile, he seemed almost to float a few inches above the ground as he turned. Though he was now looking away from me, he got those 4 shots off in a hurry. They were meant to do the most damage to me, aimed at critical areas of my upper body and ending in my heart. To my dismay, I saw my shots hit the dirt behind him as they missed the mark again, though I knew at least one of them went through the muscle in the back of his right leg. I heard him howl, and I knew that must have hurt. "You must be getting tired because you're slowing down," I said, and then began to laugh again, knowing that would infuriate him. He fired another volley at me, though this time he didn't expose his body. He was now hiding behind a wall. That told me that he was scared, and I liked that. Too angry to think right, I was getting to him, and we both knew it, though he would have denied it. Then I saw the bullets as they came towards me, slow and deliberate like torpedoes in a submarine movie. I didn't have time to react or move away. I saw them tear through the air between us, but as soon as they got close enough to feel the heat of them, I faded out. Everything turned black, and I thought I was dead. I thought that one bullet I hadn't seen had pierced my heart, and that at least it was painless. I was even thinking that this wasn't as bad as I had feared, that it was almost as peaceful as going to sleep in my own bed. When I opened my eyes, instead of an angel or something worse than I thought I might deserve, I was sitting at a campfire, and across the way was a very old man talking about the good old days. It was dark there, with a million stars above us, more than seemed possible. Then I could hear crickets, coyotes, and a hoot owl somewhere nearby, and I wondered at that owl because we were in the desert. I looked around, wondering where the hell I was, and for a moment I thought this might be heaven, and I was outside the pearly gates or something. But all I saw was sand and the sage that grew all around it. As if to further confirm I was back in the desert, a tumbleweed swept past at that moment. I could see that we were in a low part of the sand. On two sides of us, the sand swelled up like a mighty wave that was intent on turning over your small boat and drowning you. Maybe to keep the wind off us or to keep warm, we had sat in that low point. The other two sides were almost flat and even, but away from the wind as well. There were several logs burning brightly in the fire between us, though there were no woods nearby, and I wondered where he had found any logs such as these. So many things there made no sense, and I was the only one that seemed to notice that or even cared. I thought they were not real then, because though he never stroked the fire or added anything to it, the fire never abated in the least. Those logs seemed not to be burning at all, though the flame was warm and real. The wood still had bark and a few green leaves at the ends, and seemed untouched even by smoke. I looked around me then, and I couldn't tell what time it might be. The night was clear and bright, and I felt that if I climbed to the top of that rise, I could see for a million miles in every direction.